Bet you didn't expect two parts today, did you? Anyway, in the previous episode, after saying goodbye to his sister, Lin got right back to grinding levels. But things weren't all easy, since the monsters and bosses in the core area are getting really tough. And don't forget about that giant bird-like creature that managed to eat the turtle boss. That thing was seriously giving Lin some really bad vibes. Meanwhile, the team from the Gallon Guild had also made their way into the core area. They've been on high alert, but weirdly enough, they haven't come across a single monster. This made them question if they had seriously been stuck in the outer area this whole time. After some head-scratching, they decide to push deeper. On the flip side, Lin is still busy slaughtering monsters and bosses, all while keeping an eye out for the dragon dungeon. Just as he's deep in thought, he spots some figures up ahead. Turns out it's a group of human professionals. He relaxes a bit when he recognizes their outfits from the Gallon Guild. At the same time, they also saw Lin, however. They were shocked, wondering how could someone only at level 33 make it all the way here, and all by himself. Before they can wrap their heads around it, Lin casually warns them not to venture any further, as it's very dangerous ahead. He doesn't even wait for a response before turning to leave. But the Knight Captain? She's not buying it. In her eyes, this low-level kid has the nerve to act like he's giving her advice. Who the hell does he think he is? But then, the girl with the big hammer started eyeing Lin curiously. Weird. What's he doing here in the Eternal Trial Grounds? She mumbled to herself. Her curiosity got the best of the Knight Captain, who asked if she knew the guy. The girl nodded, dropping Lin's name and explaining how he'd snagged first place in the level 20 category during the recent professional competition, even breaking the challenge match record in the process. The captain, though she hadn't attended the competition, definitely knew that name, and she began reconsidering Lin's words. She then began to wonder, could Lin have ventured deep into the core area and made it out? If so, maybe his warning wasn't just random advice. After a moment of thought, she made the call. They'd stick to the edges and not push any deeper. She wasn't ready to turn tail just yet, but she also wasn't keen on ignoring someone with Lin's reputation. The scene then shifts to Lin. Hours had passed, and that uneasy feeling was still gnawing at him. However, he eventually left the inner part of the core area, figuring it was the safer bet. He couldn't shake off the thought of the group he'd met earlier. Hopefully, they listened to his advice. Just as he was about to move on, the sky lit up with a flash of red light. His head snapped up. There's no mistake. That was a distress signal, and it was coming from the direction of the core area. Without hesitating, Lin summoned a few skeletons and charged toward the source, but he couldn't help but be worried, thinking what if that monster he'd spotted earlier was drawn to the signal too? A few more seconds passed, and yet another flare shot into the sky. Lin cursed under his breath. Idiots! Are they trying to invite the boss over? But just as he thought that 4 more flares went up at once. Whatever they were dealing with must be serious. Without hesitation, Lin sped up, racing toward the signal. When he arrived, just like he thought, it was the Galen squad he had met earlier. They were in a tight circle, completely surrounded by monsters. At the front, the Knight Captain looked in bad shape, covered in wounds but still trying to keep morale up. She continued to tell them to hold on, and help is on the way. Among them, Lin spotted the girl from before, the one wielding that ridiculously oversized hammer. Despite its size, she was swinging it around with ease, sending monsters flying left and right. Then, using her skill, she locked a couple of them in place. Lin let out a sigh of relief and began counting heads. Thankfully, they hadn't lost anyone yet. That was a relief. Taking a few steps forward, he created a legion group. Suddenly, in the middle of their frantic battle, the group received a legion invite. The Knight Captain's face lit up. They believed it was the reinforcements, but as soon as she accepted the invitation, she froze. The legion had exactly one other member, a level 33 professional named Lin. In that instant, hope turned into disappointment. Seriously? One person? And to make it worse, he was only level 33. Even if he was some super prodigy who broke the challenge match record, what good would that do them now? The Knight Captain gritted her teeth, thinking they'd just have to hold out and pray for more reinforcements. But then, everyone heard the heavy stomping sound, like a massive army approaching. Suddenly, from all directions, a swarm of skeletons charged in, crashing straight into the monsters surrounding the group. After the initial impact, even more skeletons appeared, hacking away with great swords. The monsters shrieked in pain as they were taken down one after another. The team members breathed a collective sigh of relief. Few of them exclaimed, "Whoa, this guy's amazing," another person blurted out. "How does he have this many summons? And they're so strong." As the skeletons continued their assault, the girl with the massive hammer finally let out a breath, glancing over at Lin. She quietly asked her captain if they were saved. At the same time, the entire group now had their gazes fixed on Lin. For the first time, it looked like they might actually make it through this. As the skeletal warriors continued to chop down the monster, the skeletal mages joined the fray, unleashing a barrage of elemental attacks. Within moments, not a single monster was left alive. Before his skeletons go and collect the loot, the system notifies him that he has collected starlight shards. He checked the continuous stream of pop-ups, then looked up. The hammer-wielding girl was smiling at him. Clearly, she'd been using her collection skill to gather the loot and had been sending it straight to him. Lin was genuinely surprised. Didn't expect to run into such a rare legendary profession here. The knight captain led her team over to Lin, thanking him for saving their lives. But Lin didn't waste time with small talk. Instead, he got straight to the point, urgently telling them to leave right now. It's too dangerous. The captain was confused. But Lin already killed all the monsters here. Why would it still be dangerous? Lin was speechless and was about to explain, but it was already too late. Before he could get the words out, a piercing screech echoed from the sky. Lin ordered everyone to stick close to him, and they needed to move fast. The knight captain quickly caught on and urged her team to follow him. Though they couldn't quite make out what the creature was, just the massive shadow circling overhead told them everything they needed to know. This thing is huge, and possibly a powerful boss. When Lin casually mentioned that this boss had recently devoured another boss, their jaws practically hit the floor. But no matter how fast they ran, it wasn't enough. The enormous black bird swooped down from the sky with terrifying speed, way faster than they could ever hope to outrun. Lin called out for everyone to gather close, and in an instant, he summoned all of his skeletons to form a protective circle around the group. One of them couldn't help but wonder how a monster this big found them in a place as vast as the core area. Clearly, they hadn't even realized that their earlier distress signals had basically acted as a beacon, drawing it right to them. Only the knight captain figured it out, her stomach sinking as the realization hit her. They were the ones who brought it here. Before anyone had time to process it, the boss unleashed a wave of fire from its beak. In a single, devastating blast, 30 skeletons were incinerated on the spot. The rest were scorched. The undead general immediately activated his healing skill, trying to patch up the rest of the skeletons, but the boss didn't give them even a second to breathe. With a single powerful beat of its wings, the monster sent a storm of black fireballs raining down like a meteor shower. The already weakened skeletons had no chance. Then, another 46 of them were obliterated in the blink of an eye. Right after, the boss's claws lashed out, snatching up a poor skelly and hurling it into the air. With one swift bite, it crunched the poor thing, chewing loudly before spitting it out in pieces. As if that wasn't enough, it followed up with yet another blast of fire. Lin quickly activated his detection skill, and the results were jaw-dropping. This was a level 62 Ancient Phoenix, with 250,000 strength, 100,000 agility, 150,000 spirits, and 100,000 vitality. It had two powerful abilities, but its special traits were even scarier. Immune to fire elements, 60% reduction in elemental and physical damage, and its razor-sharp beak could ignore all defenses. Even Lin was speechless, and the girls, well, they were on the verge of full-on panic. "How is this boss even real?" one of them stammered, her voice trembling as she believed even a level 70 top-tier professional couldn't beat this thing. The hammer girl, eyes wide with fear, turned to Lin and asked him if he could beat it. Lin didn't respond. If he could beat it, would he even be running? The answer was pretty obvious. Just as he braced for impact, another wave of black flame came crashing down. This round of skills wiped out 30 more of Lin's skeletons, leaving him with fewer and fewer defenses. The boss didn't let up for even a second. Each dive from the sky ended with its claws grabbing a few more skeletons, crushing them to dust. Losing his skeletons was painful, sure, but at least he could always summon more as long as his spirit and mana held out. But the real problem here is he had to escape before all his summons got wiped out. This boss was way too strong for him to take on right now, so his only option was to buy time, enough for the girls to make it out of the core area. He tells them to run while his skeletons are still holding it off. Lin shouted over his shoulder. As the team started moving, Lin was about to make his own escape when he suddenly felt a cold chill down his spine. The boss had locked onto him. He glanced back, and his heart sank as he saw the massive bird's glowing eyes fixed on him. Oh, great. Now the boss was chasing him. He turned back to the others, shouting for them not to follow him and to run in the opposite direction. For a second, the Knight Captain froze. Was Lin really planning to abandon them? But the Hammer Girl quickly realized what was happening. The boss was chasing Lin, not them. Lin was trying to lure it away, sacrificing himself so they could get away. The captain's face burned with shame for even thinking Lin would abandon them. Taking a deep breath, she rallied the team. "We need to move. We can't let Lin's sacrifice be in vain. Run!" Meanwhile, Lin was running for his life, with the boss hot on his heels. But killing him wasn't going to be that easy. The gigantic bird suddenly paused in midair, then let loose a wave of black flames. Lin barely managed to hold out, recasting his skeletal armor 6 times in a row to withstand the blast. The boss is really getting on his nerves. Timing his next move perfectly, he unleashed his soul flame right at the boss. The creature shrieked in agony, but the moment was short-lived. The boss quickly recovered and retaliated with a devastating skill of its own. The explosion that followed was massive, sending out shockwaves that whipped up a tornado-like gust, tearing through the sky. From a distance, the girls could see the blast. The Hammer Girl's heart sank as she stared at the blast, wondering how could anyone survive something like that. The girls couldn't hold back their tears anymore. Even the Knight Captain let out a heavy sigh, her voice filled with regret. Lin, he was a great person. But what they didn't know was that, as the dust and smoke cleared, Lin wasn't just standing there. He had his powerful Earth Dragon God by his side. With the help of his skeletal armor and the world boss, Lin had just barely managed to survive the attack. Sure, he'd lost a ton of skeletons, and yeah, he looked like he'd been through hell. But Lin wasn't going down that easily. As for that giant black bird, after wiping out so many of his skeletons and making him fight for his life, Lin wasn't about to forget. One day, he'd come back for payback. Just as Lin was thinking about making his escape, an even more powerful aura approached, and it was moving fast. Squinting into the distance, Lin's eyes widened as a familiar figure flew toward him. It was a succubus, floating midair gracefully. A teasing smile appeared on her lips. Well, I didn't expect to find you hiding out here in the core zone, Lin," she purred. Lin's mind raced. How did she find him? Then it clicked. He must have been marked at some point. As Mina hovered in the air, her eyes twinkling with mischief, she licked her lips and spoke in a seductive tone, saying, "Why don't you be a good boy and come with me? I'll take very good care of you."